So a big thank you to our newscasters, our roving reporter, and to Mr. Simon Peaker for giving us those insights into that very first day of Pentecost. So we've heard about a strong wind and flames. So was it just a lot of hot air? If I can have the next slide, please. Interestingly, this morning, through the bedroom curtains, this was what I saw, having previously prepared the original slide. So there seems to be, we could even see a flame there, quite small. So I thought that was quite opportune. So yeah, have the next slide, please. Okay, so waiting is something we often find quite difficult, and the disciples had been waiting. So Jesus had been with them; they'd seen him a number of times after he'd risen from the dead, and then he had ascended to his Father, and they'd been told to wait in Jerusalem for the Holy Spirit to come. So they were waiting. Does anybody like waiting here? Anyone fond of waiting? Really? No? What do people do when they wait? Do you sort of twiddle your thumbs or check your phone or tuts or whatever? It can be quite difficult. But the disciples were spending a lot of time in prayer and time together, and probably quite nervous because they didn't know what the authorities were going to do or quite what was going to happen. And so after all that waiting, what they'd been waiting for came, and it was something unseen. And we sing, it was one of the many songs on the Holy Spirit we didn't sing today. There is one, Spirit of God, unseen as the wind. So it's not visible. The wind is not visible. But we can't see the wind, but it is something real. But how do we know that? Any thoughts on how we know that? We can feel it. We can feel a breeze. Anything else that we can see in trees? Yes? Did somebody have something there? Anything else? You can sometimes smell it, like at the sea, you can smell the saltiness maybe. So there's a number of things. So on the next slide we'll see some of those. So it could be a bit of a bad hair day if it's a breezy day, or it could be the wind in the south, so you really see a sailing boat be going forward quite quickly. The leaves, the trees we've mentioned, and of course the Dutch element of the windmills. You can see them going round with the wind. To bring the Dutch in, sorry about that. So it can be very visible. So if we move on a slide, I look at the Holy Spirit. Does anybody know when the Holy Spirit is actually first mentioned in the Bible? The quiz question for you there. Any ideas? It's actually quite early. It's in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. So it's really quite early. Those first two verses are, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So the Spirit of God was there right at the time of creation, which is quite exciting, I think. Then the Holy Spirit is mentioned a number of times in the Old Testament. But it tends to be just for a chosen few people. It's not like that everybody is receiving the Holy Spirit. There's a few people, and I'll give a couple of examples in a minute. And often for specific tasks. So it's really very limited and focused somehow. And then, if you remember when Jesus was baptised, we actually then we're told that Jesus saw the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove descending upon him, and he received the Holy Spirit, and there was something visible there. Then Pentecost we've heard about in our news item just now. So that was then when the Holy Spirit was poured out on the disciples. They'd been waiting. As promised, the Holy Spirit came and they spoke in tongues. So there's something very tangible happening there. And then moving forward to us, as we heard in our reading, the Holy Spirit is a promise and a gift for all Christians. And forever is an important word, as Barbara read in what Jesus told his disciples. The Holy Spirit will be sent to be with us forever. And if we can move on one more slide again. I thought it was interesting just to mention a couple of examples in the Old Testament, because we tend to think about the Holy Spirit, really, we focus on Pentecost, I think. And there are some interesting examples in the Old Testament. So we hear that Pharaoh could actually see in Joseph's life that the Spirit of God was upon him. He said, can we find anyone else like this? So more obviously filled with the Spirit of God. And then you may remember Samson, this man of great strength, who did all these mighty things against the Philistines. There's a number of verses where it said the Spirit of God came upon Samson mightily or with great power. It's really this forcefulness. And he goes out and he has a donkey's jawbone at one point and he strikes down 1,000 men with it. So this power is quite striking. Moses was quite troubled when he was leading the Israelites in the wilderness, and they were sort of moaning and groaning and lots of complaints. And the Holy Spirit was upon Moses, but then it was sort of shared out over the 70 elders as well, so that they could help. But if I can find it quickly, it says, so the Lord took some of the power of the Spirit that was on Moses and put it on the 70 elders. When the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not do so again. It's a very temporary thing. And then when David was anointed king by Samuel, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And then at that same time, the Spirit of the Lord departed from the previous king, Saul. So it's sort of for certain specific tasks and then goes away again. So that's the old situation, if you like. And then if we move on again, the Holy Spirit today. We've sung several songs mentioning the Holy Spirit, and then the reading that Barbara read for us, and earlier when Jesus was speaking to his disciples about giving them the Holy Spirit, the gift that would come to them. There's several characteristics. There's a whole range, actually. So the Holy Spirit is advocate, is the word that's used sometimes, and it's being alongside somebody. So we're not left as orphans, as Jesus told his disciples. The Holy Spirit takes the form of God's presence with us, and forever. And the Holy Spirit convicts the world of sin, so sort of shows people what is wrong, guides people, counsellor, comforter, helper, guiding and teaching, reminding of what Jesus taught, empowering us as well. I mentioned briefly some of those examples of power of the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. That power is still available today. And the Holy Spirit glorifies Jesus. Jesus says at one point that the Holy Spirit will come and be able to do this because Jesus has enabled the Spirit to do that. So there's the glorification of Christ as well there. Then if we move on, I spoke about the wind being invisible, but there's effects that can be seen. I think it's the same with the Holy Spirit. We don't actually see the Holy Spirit, but we see what happens in the work of the lives of Mother Teresa up there. Christian Aid Week is this week. Lots of work happening throughout the world, empowered. I think the Holy Spirit empowering people to want to do this and giving them the abilities and the strength to do that. The fruits of the Spirit, all different aspects that the Spirit gives to people that can be shown. So love, joy, peace, goodness, faithfulness, all these positive qualities having an impact in the world. And then I put the street passes up as well. Another example, I think, of what the Holy Spirit is doing in people's lives is being shown in a tangible and practical way. We can move one on again, please. So what does all this mean for us? Well, the Holy Spirit is given for each one of us. In the last days, it was written in Joel, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. And as Simon Peter mentioned at the end of the sketch, people will dream dreams and see visions. There's this power that is there. And I keep mentioning be forever. That was something that struck me quite a bit. Jesus said, with regard to the Holy Spirit, that he may be with you forever. So there's this ongoing presence of God in us and within us. And in Galatians, we're told we are to live by the Spirit.